I have a dream, that's all I need. I'll make it happen with some work and belief. Know what I want, so I'll take it on. I've made mistakes, but mistakes make you strong.
Hi there, I'm JB. I started my investment life by reading Robert Kiyosaki's book, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, well, among others. At that time, I really didn't understand the true meaning of it. Sure, the basics made sense, but I was not really ready to fully understand the book and the potential Robert was talking about. Well, that sure changed over time, especially when I sold my first real estate and ended up paying for a lot of things I could have avoided, especially the taxes, and I was almost sued by the buyer. At that time, YouTube wasn't really a thing, and you had to learn everything by reading books or learning from your own or others' mistakes. Heck, maybe that was one of the reasons my career as a real estate mogul didn't work out. Well, that and the fact that I didn't really have the patience at that point in time, and I did not want to have all the hassle with renters and stuff. I did okay, and instead of becoming a landlord, I flipped apartments and later houses. If I was to start all over, I would spend some time watching and listening to Robert Kiyosaki's videos, and I would try his approach, only at a smaller scale to begin with. Although there are some risks associated with this process, and if he didn't have the critical mass when COVID hit, he would probably have to start all over again also. But let's start with the simple part of his advice. Be your own boss. Don't work for money, make money work for you. Use debt to your advantage and acquire assets giving you cash flow. Think about it. We have all been taught to get a job, work hard, save money, and eventually enjoy our retirement. Well, if we get there.
Study. The trouble is our school system trains us to be employees. Go to school, get a job, work hard, save money, pay your taxes, get out of debt.
Yes, the system is rigged, and I'm not sure if it's intentional or just because the people teaching us never learned anything else themselves. Well, what is the basic idea Robert Kiyosaki is teaching? First of all, have the courage to stop thinking like an employee and start thinking like an entrepreneur.
It's up to the person. It's a free choice. You want to be an employee, you choose to be an employee. You want to be an entrepreneur, you choose to be an entrepreneur, but you've got to study. They're two different people. What you have to study is different. Mentally, emotionally, and spiritually, they're different people. An entrepreneur is extremely different than an employee.
Educate yourself and find the thing you really would do even if you wouldn't get paid at all. Robert chose real estate, mostly because this is where you can earn a lot of money, almost without having any money yourself, and where the government gives you the most tax breaks. Because you provide something the government would really like people to do. Robert uses two simple illustrations to drive his point home. Illustration 1 is where he shows a version of the balance sheet where he distinguishes between assets and liabilities. Assets gives you money, liabilities cost you money. I'll let Robert explain that.
When I released Rich Dad, Poor Dad, that book caused a bit of an upset because I said, your house is not an asset. So in today's world, if you want to be rich, you have to know the difference between assets versus liabilities. One of the reasons so many people are struggling financially today is simply because they're calling their liabilities assets, such as your house is not an asset, your car is not an asset, and things like that. So very simply, when I was a young boy, my rich dad taught me, he says, you have to understand a financial statement. So this is an income statement, this is a balance sheet. Now this is overly simplified. He says, what creates something to be an asset is very simply assets, cash flow money into your pocket. And a liability takes money from your pocket. So for most people, their houses are not assets or liabilities because every month it takes money to live in that house. Even those who say, well, I don't have any debt on my house, I've paid it off. Look, you still have insurance, still have upkeep, you still have maintenance.
Yes, many people will say that their house is an asset. And what happens when you need to sell it and the housing market is down? Well, that supposed asset is no longer an asset, and all the money you have poured into it is gone. That's why Robert won't buy a house to live in. He buys real estate to rent out and make money. to buy more real estate, to rent out and get money, and so on and so on. The only exception is buying a multifamily building and living in one of the units and letting the others pay your rent, i.e. mortgage. And all this is fine, but now comes the smart part. He calls it the cash flow quadrant, or the 4 types of peoples versus tax. Robert puts it up with an ESBI. The E stands for employee, has a job, pays taxes, maybe saves a little and invests, but they pay around 40% in taxes and get only a very small percentage in tax deductions. Funny enough, the government doesn't award employees, they actually punish normal employees, even though we're all taught to become employees. Wonder why that is. The next category is self-employed, like a doctor, lawyer, small business owner, etc. They get punished even more, as they pay both the employee tax and all other taxes. So they can end up paying 60% in taxes. Now we come to the B, the business part. A large business with 400 employees or more, they pay around 20% in taxes. Why? Because they provide the government with the place all those worker bees can work and pay their taxes. That brings us to the I part. That's where Robert is, the investor. He sometimes calls them insiders, but they're basically just investors with knowledge of how the system works. And these can end up paying 0% in taxes. Yes, 0% tax. Again, that's because they take the risks and provide knowledge, liquidity, and gives the government what the government wants, like housing, factories. Now, Robert asks a question. Which quadrant would you like to be in? That should be a no-brainer for most people. And even if you won't end up paying no taxes, you will end up paying far less taxes than the normal employee. And more important, you will be able to speed up your wealth exponentially. Robert's real estate recipe in short is create a company, an LLC, so even if something should happen, or you get sued, or, the LLC will take the hit and not you. Also, the company is what gives you a lot of tax advantages. Next step, start acquiring assets that produce cash flow. Meaning, something that will give you income without you having to work for that money. Or at least not do as much work. Robert has perfected the use of debt to acquire real estate. Let the bank's money work for him and the tenants pay his mortgage and income. And the best part, he uses the tax system to do so.
Understand that money is debt. I use debt as money. And everybody thinks getting in debt is bad. Well, who told you that? And the person has been told to go to school, get a job, and work hard. You're going to pay taxes. Why? Because you work for money. So the question, well, how does a person not work for money and pay no taxes? Now, if I borrow money, guess what? Do I pay taxes on debt? Why is that? Because that's how money is created. And so the banks love it. They love people who borrow lots of money. So how do I get rich? I borrow money and I buy assets with it. The poor person borrows money and buys liabilities like purses, cars, houses, and they get poorer and poorer and poorer.
Let's look at a simple example. And here I use a small multifamily building, but you could start with a single apartment. If we want a building with, let's say, 3 apartments, say it costs around $1,265,000, like this one I found in Boston. It's a 3-story building, 3 apartments. Each apartment has 4 bedrooms and 2 baths. The currently monthly rent is around $9,500 for all 3. We put 20% down, then we would need $253,000 in down payment. Maybe you could handle that. Maybe you could handle a higher down payment, but let's stick with the 20%. If we don't have that, you could find investors who will put up some of the money or all of it. But remember, they also expect to get paid. Let's just assume you had the down payment yourself, so it doesn't get too complicated. The rent is around $3,110 per unit, which is a bit low for the area and could be raised with at least 10% with some simple fixes. Utilities is around $150 a month, so we would get around $112,000 in rent each year. Then we have our expenses. The expenses are the mortgage, which is around $73,000 a year. That's a 6% 30-year mortgage. We have some upkeep, some insurance, property tax, and miscellaneous, which a lot of it is deductible. But let's just forget that for a second. Let's say that's $17,000 a year. So the total expenses are around $90,000 a year. Let's make that $100,000 a year, just to be sure, and have a buffer for a few months without a tenant. If rent was around $112,000, expenses around $100,000, this gives us an annual income of $12,000 a year. Actually a bit more, but let's stay with the $12,000. Now, this is where we can use the tax code to our advantage. We can use the standard 3.64% depreciation for the building as a tax deduction. That's around $36,000 in tax deduction every year for 27.5 years. So again, we had $12,000 a year in taxable income. Now we have $12,000 a year in the bank and zero tax to pay, as our deduction was $36,000. We also have additional $24,000 a year we can earn before being taxed at all. So, next step is upgrading the property in the coming years to increase the rent and then back to the bank, and we get it refinanced to, let's say it's now worth $1.5 million. We already paid some of the original principal down, or should I say the renters did. Now we can refinance and get $500,000 in cash. We could pay out our investors if we had them, or now we can use that money, which is still not taxable as it's debt. It's a loan from the bank, so it's tax-free. And the renters are still paying for this debt. Now we can acquire another property. Rinse and repeat. You get the idea. The real cool part here is what's called AAD, appreciation, amortization, and depreciation. Appreciation is when the property increases in value. Typically, this will happen over time, and the great thing is, as the property appreciates, the loan stays the same. It does not appreciate, and the gains are yours, not the bank, even if the bank technically owns a part of the property. The amortization. This is when the debt or loan gets paid down, and with every month, this makes the property more valuable as the debt goes down, or it gives us more cash to buy something else. Remember, refinancing. Depreciation. This is probably the most unknown part and the one only few people talk about. Again, the government realizes that you as an owner investor have risks, so they allow you to use depreciation as a tax benefit, as long as it's within the company. This way, anything that the company owns depreciates. There's a given rate for everything, and this gives the company tax breaks. If we follow Robert Kiyosaki's plan, the idea is never to sell the house, but keep refinancing and buying more. Even if the property does not appreciate, the income it generates will be able to provide down payments of another building, or soon the amortization will. The important part here is to stay in debt and grow your amount of assets providing cash flow. Why is the debt part so important? Well, money is only numbers in a database, and debt is actually how money is made, and the reason why debt is not taxed. So why not do like Robert and use debt to acquire more and more assets that produce income? Well, the only problems I see with Robert's approach are: you would need some money before you can start. Even if you start small, there's still a need for a substantial amount of cash, or it will take some time to get to critical mass. 2. If there's a lot of renovating to do, the returns will take a lot longer, or again, longer time for the flywheel to start. If we have short-term tenants or bad tenants, the income will be fluctuating and there could be problems with a tenant or two. So we need to pace ourselves and have a buffer ready for those instances. You would either need to be somewhat of a handyman and live close, or hire a property manager and have deals with some local contractors. You will need to fix some problems we inevitably will face in the property. We also need a good accountant or tax lawyer and a small staff when we get a lot of properties. But hey, those are luxury problems. Is this a viable strategy? The short answer is yes. The long answer is it depends. We need to find the right properties and preferably in areas that are not yet popular. Usually you can find some good places just outside the popular areas as they tend to expand over time. I can only urge you to watch some of Robert Kiyosaki's videos and start an LLC and become CEO of your own company. Start off small, try it out. A lot of the wealthy people you find have started with real estate of some sort. It does take some time and it does take hard work, but eventually you will get that flywheel spinning and no longer need to spend much time on the business and just see the money come rolling in. Don't work for others where you depend on them for your paycheck. Let people work for you and let them depend on you for their paycheck. As you have watched the video all the way to this point, you have unlocked the bonus level. Congratulations! When you have your company, you need a company car. Also, depreciation. Now you have a nice car, which depreciates and is paid for by the cash flow from the business. Need a vacation? Well, if you like me, have your wife as your business partner, we go on business trips to places like Hawaii, looking for properties to invest in, etc. Again, the company is funding it, and it can be written off as a business expense. And we do go to look at properties when we're there. Nice dinners? Well, you need your business dinners, or you need to take your staff people out to dinner sometimes, as you need to keep your staff happy. Again, lots of deduction and write-offs. How about you? What are your ideas for a business that can scale and grow to your main income? Let me know in the comments, and remember to give the video a like. Only if you feel you got some value from it. And on that note, I will end this video. Remember, the best investment you can do is in you. The more you learn, the more you earn. Bye.
I have a dream, that's all I need. I'll make it happen with some work and belief. Know what I want, so I'll take it on. I've made mistakes, but mistakes make you strong. Let's break it down for a minute. I want the crown, I'm gon' get it. You hear me loud, man, I'm winning. Yeah, Charlie Sheen will be grinning. These ladies know that I'm sinning, and this is just the beginning. I'm closing in the ninth inning. There ain't no point in resisting. Living